Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I want to start by saying that it is an honor to serve with you. I think that the two of us epitomize what it means to work in a bipartisan way on an issue and a topic and a subject matter that is traditionally very bipartisan, and really set an example of how many other things should be done in our legislative body. Mr. Chair, I agree with the problem statement. I've agreed with the problem statement for the last several years with you, as we talked about not only the challenges that we face with the budget year after year, but with ever increasing needs being put upon our infrastructure, our maintenance, our ferry system, all the things that are mentioned in this. And Mr. Chair, the thing that saddens me and frustrates me is the fact that this is a bill being presented that we didn't do together. And I think, Mr. Chair, if we would have, I think the subject, the contents of this debate, the contents of this discussion would be completely different. Because overall, I think that the members on my committee and in my caucus agree on so many of the things that you're talking about today. But Mr. Chair, we also disagree vehemently on the methodology by which we're proceeding, not only in the putting together of this, as my good colleague said, putting together another piece of policy that we're going to have to possibly fix down the road once we've passed it. We vehemently disagree and oppose new taxation, Mr. Chair. Now, I appreciate the thoughtfulness for the people of the state of Washington and not putting forth a gas tax, which is traditional when we put together these revenue packages. Now, Mr. Chair, I must remind you in this committee that the policies that we adopted last year, low carbon fuel standard, cap and invest, Mr. Chair, those are taxes. Those are policies that, although have a benefit, will also have a consequence, because the end user, the citizen of Washington State, will pay for those policies. In addition, as we have just talked about, there are many other taxes being put forth and fees, including one that's very controversial, to fund this revenue proposal. Mr. Chair, I agree. We have so many things that we need to do. We made a statement when we were talking about the not adoption of the amendment that was put forth to use the sales tax that we cannot take from our operating budget because of the impact that it would have on all the other programs. Now, although that's true in many ways, as we know how that budget works, and I do acknowledge the historical transfer one time of money into this proposal out of the general fund. Mr. Chair, both of you and I and the members of this committee have seen the budget, the supplemental budget that was just proposed, that we will be voting on probably on Saturday. Record revenue, $15 billion in surplus, several billion sitting in reserves. Mr. Chair, the budget that's being proposed in the general operating budget spends $6.2 billion more over and above maintenance level and programs and all these other things. And yes, some of that money is going to some very important things, homelessness and housing and such. That's a 10% increase in spending alone since we left less than a year ago. 10%. Mr. Chair, I think what it comes down to is priorities. And I know you and I have very, very similar priorities. I always talk about that. I talk about it all the time. When we put together our format for the budget and we start talking, it's amazing how 60, 70, sometimes 80% we line up. And then just a matter of sometimes reorganizing those things. But I think this comes down to priorities. I think we agree on the priorities of what the need is. I think we disagree on the priorities of how we get there with the revenue. Mr. Chair, I think we can do both. I think we can take care of our transportation system. I think we can do it in a manner that sets the tone for the next decade plus, without raising taxes on the people of the state of Washington or imposing taxes on our neighboring states. I think we can fund and be proud of a transportation system that is equitable and sustainable and does all the things that we want to do. And I hope, Mr. Chair, as we move forward, as this thing moves forward, that we get back to what we do best, and that's work together. Mr. Chair, it's with reluctance that I'm encouraging a no vote on this policy out of committee today. But I appreciate the work that you've done, the countless hours that you have put in, and your dedication to the people of the state of Washington. It's an honor to work with you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.